so you gather all this material, and I shudder to think about how big your spreadsheets are, because I imagine that they must be like enormously complex. But you have all this material. How do you sift through it? Do you have any technology? So is it just like hard labor, or how do you sift through all the materials?
In this case, it was hard labor. I mean, it was a good organizing sort of principle, and one of our data engineers, Boy, came and helped us organize the spreadsheets as well. And basically, we were able, on a particular time code, we were able to sort of like cross-reference all of the information that we had. But we had, I can show you some of the spreadsheets. Actually, I've got a slide here. But you know, basically, you know, cross-organizing all of the data and the evidence that we had for each attack, and then, you know, cross-referencing it across multiple different pieces of information. And then things like, you know, security contacting the source of that content, as I say, because what we're trying to get is the raw media, the original file from the original device, because that will have the metadata, which for us, it could be coordinates, but it more importantly, the hour, minute, and second that the video is recorded, and CCTV camera inside, camera footage from inside hospitals and stuff like that as well. And then there might be discrepancies because different a camera's setting might be off, or, you know, the CCTV system might be off, and that happened to us a few times. And so what we would do is we'd call up somebody at the hospital and say, okay, can you show us, you know, point the camera at the clock in your camera system at the moment, and wait for it to change minute, and we'd note that down. Or we'd ask them to hold their iPhone up to match their iPhone time, or our time with their camera time, and basically calculate the difference. And anyway, so there's a little bit of a yardstick stuff that you need to do there to get the precise minute.
But so the metadata serves both to kind of report the story and to illuminate the story, but also in some ways to validate the material itself, right?
Exactly.
To make sure that you've got the right stuff and it's not, you know, in some way fabricated or.
Exactly, or it's an old photograph that's recirculated as, you know, a fresh attack, or that sort of stuff. But as you said at the start, you know, there's often multiple cameras. I remember the Cafarnabal attack. Or one of there were two attacks in Cafarnabal Hospital that we documented, and in the second one, there's two guys who run towards a rooftop, pull out their phones, and they capture the second and third strikes on the hospital. And in one video, you can see that there's a guy in front of him who's also filming the same thing. And so when we got in touch with the first source, we asked him who was with you, get in touch with them, and then get their camera media, then get in touch with the hospital and get their CCTV, and so you're cross-referencing all of those plus the pilot information.
So like a lot
recordings.
Of really complex triangulation there, and then so like it's both finding also the people and harvesting the reporting the material. I want to come back and talk a little bit about Browne and what happened at the Capitol, but I want to also hear about your team and your background, because I know you had a background at Storyful and an interesting background before you came to the New York Times, and then you set up this team, which is quite unusual within journalism. Talk to me a little bit about what were some of your thoughts in like bringing together that team and the things you were looking for in the team members and who you have on your team.
Yep. I came to the Times in 2016. I came from a startup that unfortunately is no longer around called Reportedly, and that was you know, a group of journalists led by Andy Carvin, formerly of NPR, who, you know, was very much a Twitter voice of the, you know, during the Arab Spring, and trying to in real time figure out what was going on through these networks, and kind of applying that same principle of you know, sourcing knowledge from the crowd, and figuring things out, sometimes in real time. Sometimes we would get leads and we would go off and spend 2 or 3 weeks on a short investigation, but using sort of, again, networks of sources and Twitter lists, and our ability to kind of trawl through the open web. Prior to that, I was with Storyful, as you say, which is a social media news agency. And that was very much applying similar techniques in a breaking news context, with the idea being that cameras take a while to get to events in the public interest, and often eyewitnesses are recording this stuff. And if you can verify that material and get the right credits, or even license the footage on the behalf of somebody, then of somebody who's documenting something, then you're selling a sort of a layer of trust in this unknown sort of, it was then an unknown sort of medium for a lot of newsrooms. So fast forward to the New York Times, and we tried to introduce some of that, those principles to the video unit back then, in a sort of a breaking news context. I don't know if you remember, 2016 was, of course you remember, 2016 was also a very big breaking news year, with attacks in Europe and various different events, Israel too. But eventually we saw the opportunity to do deeper investigations, and that happened in sort of spring 2017, I suppose, about 9 months maybe after I started. And yeah, so we did a couple of investigations into chemical weapons attack in Syria, that time that President Erdogan's goons beat up protesters in DC after a meeting with Trump. And then the masthead in the New York Times took an interest and said, okay, had a meeting, explained the reporting, show us, all of the sort of how you pull this together. And then they were like, oh, so it's just reporting. And so I was like, yeah, it's just a different type of reporting, different source information. And we're like, okay, so what do we need to do to build this team? And so then we set about identifying talent for that. And one of the first person onto the reporting team was Barbara Marcolini. And she came in via an internship. Brazilian journalist, speaks 5 languages, was doing a master's in New York in video journalism, was spending her days off in Storyful. And so she had like all of the skills, and is also, had reporting experience from Brazil, and was a great addition to the team, and is still on the team. Then Christoph Kuttel, who's an Austrian expert in satellite imagery analysis, but also had started using that in investigations with open source, with crowdsourced media and open source media. And me and Christoph knew each other for a few years prior. And then the team built from there. I think the next person on the team was Christiaan Triebert from Bellingcat, who I had met that summer that we set up the team. And then he eventually came and joined us from the Netherlands. And then who else? Evan Hill, Haley Willis. Evan Hill was a Middle East correspondent. He was one of the reporters on the Russia tapes along with Christiaan. Anyway, so the team just like slowly built from there. And now we're a team of 15 people, I think 16 people, about 8 of us are immigrants. And so there's a good mix of folks there.